So the topic of this webinar is the unfolding mystery of compensation display, fines or no fines. Um, this is an important topic. Let me introduce everybody who's on. Corey McCloskey is the president of John R. Wood. Sara Fogg is the director of product and implementation at PrimeMLS. And Prem Luthra is the SVP of mergers and acquisitions at T3. So thank you all for being my latest victims. So the first thing we're going to talk about, we've done a little bit on the prep calls, is we're going to talk a little bit about sort of a quick recap. As Prem pointed out earlier, today, today marks sort of the official, I guess tomorrow's the 18th, right? But it's basically the official 30 days since the world as we know it changed, sort of formally and officially. We certainly have been talking about it for long enough, worrying about it for long enough, paying for it for long enough. So all of those things. But now we are in the new reality. So I appreciate Prem for noting that, because it is interesting. It's almost like, in a presidency, and we're not getting political, you would say the first 100 days, this is our first 30. Maybe we'll do a first 90 or 100 days later when I'm, desperate for topics. So we'll see where we are. But just to recap the current changes real quick, and then I'm going to go around and we'll kind of get into it. Just for everybody, the main changes that we're at least going to be talking about today are, number one, listing agents can no longer offer compensation to buyer's agents on the MLS, right? Hence the key topic here about display. Sellers are no longer required to pay buyer agents fees, and that's certainly not that they were ever required, but that is certainly much more clear to them. I know somebody's going to scream at me and say they were never required. Okay, noted. Buyers must sign a buyer broker agreement to see a listing. So those are the three top things that we're going to focus on. We're not going to throw everything at the kitchen sink, but we're really especially going to talk about the unfolding mystery of display. So I think that my first question to the panel is, will these rules stick at all? This is not, you guys brought it up, but I have been going to, at the conferences, people are asking sort of, and honestly, it surprised me when people asked me, I'll be honest, and said, do you think they'll stick? I'm like, well, it's been like a year or two in the making. How would they not stick? So I'll start with Prem, actually. Like, will they stick, and why wouldn't they stick? Like, in what world do they not stick?
I
We're not
almost
talking about like other stuff expanding, like more legislation. We'll talk about that at the end. We're talking about today's.
I don't know if I want to get into sort of the crystal ball. Are they going to stick? To me, it's all about, these are the rules right now, and we as an industry have to navigate them and abide by them, right? And who can accurately predict the future? We don't know. Look, this has been a shock to the system. But this is a resilient industry, right? At the end of the day, we're a resilient industry. We've gone through stuff before. The great news for us and kind of what we do in our respective sectors is, consumers are still going to buy and sell properties. Aside and apart from all this backdrop that we're dealing with, kind of the intricacies of it, consumers are still going to buy and sell properties because they're getting married and graduating college and having families and, whatever. And so those life events continue to happen. I think we just need to kind of say, okay, it is what it is right now. I may not like the speed limit at 55, but I'm going to drive. So,
and it could be 65 soon enough.
Or 75, or you come to Texas, it's 80 in some places.
Oh, so. Jesus. All right. What about you, Sara? Do you think it'll stick?
I think I'm the one that broached this on our prep call because it was just 2 years ago for those MLSs that have public-facing websites, and we actually have two, that we were required, due to transparency, to put compensation out on our websites. And in 2 years later, not only is it off the websites, but it's completely out of the MLS.
Yeah.
But I think Prem's right too, in the fact that we're constantly evolving. The only thing consistent with real estate is change. So who knows what's going to happen 2 years from now, and what gets either added back in or taken away or morphed into something different.
That's true. It is. I do think, and I'll turn to Corey. I do think it is. It's funny you say about the thing about this industry and change. It is actually what's, I think, has kept me in this industry, and what I love about it is, I mean, And I think it's what makes us perhaps all a little who we are today to be in this industry. And I do think it changes so much more than other industries. I do. I mean, other industries can be very slow to change. This one, not so much. So what do you think, Corey?
Well, I guess in my marketplace in Southwest Florida, we are in a little bit of a bubble because we are primarily a second and third home market. So we resist that change until the very last minute before it's forced upon us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with Prem and Sara. I mean, I definitely think some sort of iteration of these rules will absolutely stick with us.
Okay, I think so too. I think that's my opinion. They might iterate a bit, but I think this was, I will say, as change goes, this industry does tend to turn on a dime and has a lot of nuances. This change was the biggest change that I've seen in the industry in a very, very long time, and maybe ever. This one was really different than other changes, which, and I think because, and I'll put this out there, this industry changed legislatively. And it doesn't, we sometimes change it ourselves. We have RISA will make changes, right? Or we'll make our own changes in how we play the game, syndications, the role that different portals have, players have. But legislatively, we don't get legislated a lot. This industry has often sort of self-regulated, let's face it, to some degree. So I think that's perhaps part of it. On that note, so let's move to like misinformation. Let's talk about like the meat of it, why people have signed on. How to display compensation. I was going to say, and I told you I was going to say this, I'm not even sure I understand how a listing agent is allowed to currently display if there is compensation for the buyer broker. I literally did some research. I'd like to think I know my stuff. And I was like, wait, okay, so they can't mow it into their lawn. They can't put it on their keychain. They can't have a little note drop out of the lockbox. They can't put, oh, my favorite, a 3 at the bottom of the price, at the end of the price. Did you see that one? That the price was 2,900 or 295,003. So what before we talk about the misinformation that is out there, what is accurate? Like, what can people do? Corey, I see your mouth. I mean, Sara, I see you starting to jump. So go, girl, do it.
Well, what they
Or your
can't do is,
market, and I understand it is
yes,
market dependent. And
and
by the
it's
way,
also depending.
one last thing. If people have questions and please hit the Q&A. I forgot. So please, if you have questions, I'll read them as we're going. I'll read them at the end. I'll try and insert them in. If you have comments, I often read comments. So please jump in with us.
So the key is like number one, and I think this goes back to what you were just saying, is this change. Part of the other reason that this was so huge is it took one of the pillars out from under the MLSs, one of our founding principles. So that was rough. So what they can't do is put it in the MLS.
Well, you said it out loud. Good for you, Sara. You said it out loud. I'm proud of you. I mean, you said it was a pillar of the MLS. You're 100% correct. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, but we do so much more than just cooperation compensation.
I couldn't agree more, but by perception,
correct. They can't put it anywhere in the MLS. Can't do it. I'll tell you, we made these changes for this. This marks the 30 days. We did it 60 days ago. But what they can do is if they're working with a web provider, they have an IDX website, and they have a way to enter that information directly to that. They can display compensation on their own listings, but not on anybody else's, on their own websites. Now, what they can't do, and I am going to give credit to Showing Time Plus because they put something in place for this. If a buyer's agent goes in to schedule a showing, if an MLS opts into it, they can have a pop-up message come up that they have to accept saying, you must have a buyer agreement in order to show this property. That's one way of doing it. We went the other route. They also used to have a banner down there during the COVID times. I don't know if you guys remember seeing that. They reutilized that space and instead put something there as well. So that's what we had opted to do, to say, hey, you must have a buyer agreement in place in order to show the property. So there are people doing that. But part of the reason they did that is if they were to send that information over, we would have to cut their feed. Because any third party that we send the MLS information to, they cannot feed that information to an IDX website either. So it really hits onto the vendor side of the house too.
Okay, but I'm selling my house. I've signed an agreement.
Yep.
is the buyer broker for a buyer that's interested in seeing it, or with Corey. Corey has signed with Prem. How does Prem find out if he's getting paid on the listing by the seller?
Now that one's outside the
Yeah.
purview of the MLS.
That, that was sly, Corey. I saw it. I saw that. Yeah.
You have to call. You have to
But
text.
you can call. You can call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can call and ask. Because some of the stuff I read is like if they hear you're talking, the MLS will fine you, blah, blah. So you can call and ask.
At least not in our area, we will not be fined. So I'm talking about my specific
I
area.
understand.
You absolutely can call, you can text, you can send an email, you can send carrier pigeons. So yes, you can do any of those things too. But the challenge is with that, well, I don't want to keep going, but I'll leave it right there.
No, please do. That's good.
The challenge is, does the listing agent, you know, because if I'm a buyer's agent and I call the listing agent and I say, hey, is your seller offering compensation? They're getting all these C words mixed up together, right? So they're mixing up compensation and concessions and all these things. So this is a whole new world for a percentage of agents in the industry. So agents are learning just at the same time that the consumer is learning, which makes it triply more confusing.
Wow, that's so well said. The C word, I have to take that as a quote. I'm gonna like reword this video. So I mean, just to be clear with you, Sara, you agree with that statement. Is it true for Prime only, that it's okay for the agents to call each other and say, hey, am I getting paid, and that kind of thing? Of course.
They do.
They
They
must.
have to communicate with each other. And
Well,
obviously it's real estate, so everything's negotiable. So yeah, yeah.
Okay. And that gets into Prem, and I know like I know that if we want to dovetail a little bit more into something that Sara mentioned, which is actually one of the reasons I did this topic, was that a broker I know, names remaining nameless, is going to display it on their consumers on their broker website.
What's happening? It's happening.
Yeah. And I want to turn to Prem and say, I think that you had mentioned the vendors are nervous, right? Because just one last thing before I let Prem comment is it's tricky where it's all about how the data moves, right? So if a broker sends it to the vendor, but it can't mix with any MLS data, so they have to basically create a feed of what their own listings, so they can't touch the MLS at all. So Prem, I don't know if you want to, how you're getting this. Go ahead.
If you don't mind, I want to rewind. I think
Sure.
I know a very innovative, technologically savvy broker in Corey's neck of the woods in Florida that is ahead of the curve, has been ahead of the curve for a long time. And he's developed an app where agents can sort of communicate with one another in an encrypted fashion. You know, when he showed it to me, the words out of my mouth were, this is like WhatsApp for real estate, right? Like where people can communicate. So it's all about communication, right? Like part of the value that a buyer's agent brings to the table and a listing agent brings to the table is that they negotiate these things. It's a negotiation. And so communication is key. Getting to your point about the seller offering up, what they're willing to pay a buyer's agent. So we've been in it in a month, and certainly 1, 2, 3 months leading up to the deadline in mid-August. A lot of brokers, and I talk with a lot of brokers, talk with a lot of tech companies. They were asking their tech vendor, their website platform provider, hey, I want to put this on the website. And, this is not something where, a website vendor flips a switch and it's on there, right? It requires engineering, it requires time. And so like, who's going to pay for it, right? Like, is the broker going to, no, the broker is saying, you're my website provider, I want to put it on my website. Well, no, we don't have this. We're going to have to build it. I was talking to a website platform vendor last Thursday, and a very well-known one. And he said that 60% of his customers want to provide, what the seller is willing to pay on their listings, right? On their website, on their listings. And The other 40% of his customers don't want to go near it. And the issue, I think the overarching issue still with a lot of vendors is, and I think with the industry in general, people are worried about getting sideways with the rules and regulations. They're worried about, is there another shoe that's dropping here
Right.
with these attorneys coming in with the next wave of lawsuits, right? These spurious lawsuits that are going to flood the market, and tech vendors are like, we don't want to get stuck in the middle of this. And so, I know vendors that are actually making their customer, to the extent that they dedicate the time to do it, because it's a project, they're making their customer sign a waiver, a release, right? Saying, hey, look, we're not a party to any of this. We're building what you asked us to build. And to the extent that you have an ambulance chaser person come after you, we're sort of indemnified from all this. And so that's kind of adding another layer of sort of complication or issue.
Honestly, I think that's smart. If I were a vendor, I probably would do that, candidly. I think given the current climate, what does it hurt you? And frankly, any broker that doesn't want to sign waivers, it's suspect to me, candidly. So I think that's probably very smart. But I do think it's good for the vendors to serve the John R. Woods of the world if they wanted to do it, to add this data in. I do also think when I first heard about it from a broker who was going to do it, I said, oh, so you're really going to think of it this way too, Prem. They're going to want to drive even more traffic to their local site. So it's actually to the benefit of the broker, because then the MLS says, great, it's not in the MLS. We've done our job.
That's absolutely happening. That's happening right now.
So John or broker XYZ goes out there and says, hey, you know what? You want to know what the payment is? Come to our website. You can find out on our listings. And it's going to drive traffic. I mean, is that right, Corey? I mean, is that a fair statement?
Yeah, it definitely, yes, that is fair. But remember,
it could be a way to drive traffic.
It could be, but also that is just an advertisement, right? So it's not technically official. So that's something that people need to kind of keep because as you mentioned before, it's still somewhat negotiable, even though the seller might say, I want to offer X. Remember, that's still, price is negotiable, terms are negotiable, all that stuff.
Right. That's a fair point too,
right? So I think it's important to keep all that sort of in mind as we go through this. And who are we to and to think like most agents, right? You would like to think that most agents are good, caring people who just want to help their customer, right? And I'm a transaction state, so I'm going to say customer. I know some people use client, but I got to stick with my transaction state lingo, right? Okay. So most people truly care about their customer. And if my seller says to me, you need to do this, I want to take care of my customer because the code of ethics bounds me to, right? So these are all things that's floating around in the agent's mind. And then you throw the settlement in there and the wording and all that. And no wonder everybody is totally confused.
Yeah, but that's such a great point. I do think it's such an interesting point about it being negotiable. Okay, so we've solved the problem. They can call each other, they can talk about each other. That becomes easier. But you're right. If you put it on the website and you say it's 3% and it gets negotiated down, I mean, what are you going to do? You could say 3% or subject to negotiation, then nobody's going to offer you 3%, right? They're going to immediately offer you 2%. So then you're right. To Prem's point and back again, it comes to be about communication. I'm going to read a question we got in because I like it. And this is the perfect place to ask it. Somebody asked, where do you draw the line for creative wording in the MLS? Do you allow, as long as it doesn't verbatim mention compensation or commission? There's those C words. Are there certain ways of speaking about concessions, another C word, that you don't allow in the remarks? Corey, do you want to, Sara, do you want to, since that's an MLS one, do you want me to reread it?
No, I can see it. I've got it up right here.
Okay, good.
I was looking at that going,
enough.
Wow.
Okay.
Someone had to ask it. It's one of those things.
Well, it is this kind of masterclass. We want them to.
Yeah. The creative wording, we're not going to allow it. I mean, the public remarks are for describing the property. Period. That's what they're there for. And for us, we have a delayed showings. We don't have a coming soon status. So that's the place to say, hey, showings are going to start on this date if for some reason they're delayed. We actually have rules in place in listing maintenance. If you try and put compensation in and save the listing, it's going to throw you an error and say, try again, take that word out. When it comes to that. So we do monitor, and we have a compliance team that is on this.
I bet, man.
Yeah, and it is. And then concessions is a
go in
whole
the
different.
MLS. Full stop. Don't do it. No creativeness. Don't do it.
Exactly. And like I said, we had put this in place on January 15th.
We aren't talking about real estate agents, though. I mean,
true. And already are.
All of you watching, do not do it. Don't do it.
We put this in place on July 15th and had that month basically of education to get people prepared for this, so that when August 17th hit, they were going to be good to go.
Yeah, and a lot of the MLSs did that. You weren't the only. I mean, I work with a lot of the larger MLSs and saw a lot of the language, and they did a huge amount. It's like CRMLS. Some of the others did just you know, a huge amount of work. I know Miami did. I know Beaches did.
Yeah,
Just did a lot of work on educating people ahead of time. Stellar did. So in fairness,
Brianna did an amazing job. Our director of customer success, she did a fabulous job in communicating this all out to our members, and everybody did. You know, in this industry as a whole, everyone had the information out there. And concessions is not compensation, so no, it doesn't belong in concessions either. And we're going to hit you with it if you put it in there and you try and skirt it around it.
do you think all the MLSs, sorry to interrupt, Sarah, but do you think all the MLSs are hammering it down that hard? I mean, you're involved in CMLS, and I know you can't speak for everybody, but is that the prevailing? Do you feel like the industry edict, or do you think some are trying to be a little more relaxed about it and not as vigilant? Sorry to put you on the spot.
I am hopeful that a lot of MLSs are taking this route. I'll put it that way. We are, you know, in the reality is we are competitors.
The political speech. I mean, I'm in DC. That was an excellent answer.
But I'm hopeful on that one. And you know, there's some people who are hardlining it. Greg Robertson had that post come up where an agent was like floored at the fact they were getting fined. And it's like, have you been living under a rock?
Yeah.
Real estate agents, not even just realtors. I mean, we allow both in New Hampshire. Everyone was aware of this. So how can you not be surprised when you get a fine when you try and circumvent the rules?
And what happens, Corey? What happens, Corey? You're the broker. Your agent gets fined. I mean, what are you doing to on the broker side? Are you like, here's ways to skirt it, or I know, just kidding. Just kidding, just kidding, just kidding. But I mean, you know, but are you like, how do you help them? How do you help, you know, partner with your MLS? I mean, obviously a lot of companies pay big fees, so no large brokerage wants to pay again either. So blah, 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 right?
No, definitely not. So luckily or unluckily, I am vice chair of my MLS, my local MLS committee.
Ah, nice.
So, I mean, you know, I would hope that eventually the MLS platforms would kind of ban certain words from even being put into the system.
Oh, interesting.
They're not necessarily allowed, right?
Oh, so interesting. Yeah.
I go in, and this is kind of crazy, but I go in, we've got like 1,000+ listings, right? I go in and go into my confidential comments and use that wildcard feature and search for the two in our area, we're not allowed to say a couple words. I go in every day and search to make sure none of my agents are doing that, because,
nice.
You know, and then I shoot an email and say, hey, you know, you got to get this out of there or else you're going to be fined, because, you know, if they make the mistake, they pay the fine. But different MLSs in my market area are finding different things. So my local MLS, $1,000 first offense, another MLS down the street, $2,500 first offense. So, you know, and every MLS chooses whatever they want to do. You know, because I understand they're running a business too, and they're trying to protect themselves.
Corey, I'm going to put you on the spot. Like, you go in every day and you go and do your own searching, right?
Yeah.
Love that.
Like, how much time do you think you invest per week doing that?
Well, I mean, I've been in the business 22 years. It takes me less than 2 minutes to do a quick search. So literally, I mean, 10 minutes a week, I can check all of my active listings, which for me is worth it, because my agents know I got their back. Like, that's the way we've run this whole
Well, thing. Not only do they know you have their back, but let's face it, they also know that you're watching. Right. So that's, you know, that's different. That's almost like, you're going to get in trouble at school. You're also going to get in trouble at home.
Well, and they
I-
try and work around. We had somebody, oh, what was it, right after we had done, and they turned around, buyer's agent will receive 2 cruises, the chat. So they are like completely trying, and it gets shut down quick.
Wow,
And
2
thankfully,
cruises.
in the real
Did it say
estate
that on the
world,
listing? It
yes,
said it on the.
I'm
Oh,
like, I
wow.
would have printed that thing
See
off
what I
like
mean?
that.
Sarah,
They're
can
gonna
I
do
get
it.
3 cruises? Coming
I
on
know.
with 3 cruises.
But you have to sit there, and like I said, we target words using our rules to make sure that they can't put things in, but they find workarounds like that to do.
Is there
But word,
software out there? Like, is
I
there,
was
so
just going there,
I know you,
Audrey.
oh, I knew you
Like,
were. I teed you up,
For
sir.
for
Go.
any product person on this call,
Mhm.
this is a perfect application. We'd all been talking about AI for how long? This is AI right here. The
Yep.
fact
Yeah,
that Corey
yeah.
spends 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever the amount of time per day, per week, whatever, she could be out recruiting and retaining more of her agents, right? Like, this is AI right
Yeah,
here.
and honestly, there's software out there like this that could be retooled in 3 seconds, right? That crawls through, and checks for things that aren't, kosher, so to speak. So, all right, let's pivot a little bit. That's helpful. I thought that was super interesting. And in terms of like the current listing agreements, in terms of how they're addressing whether the seller pays and doesn't pay, let's kind of dovetail off your comments, Corey, that it's negotiable anyway, right? So it did Anthony Lamacci, forgive me if I didn't pronounce it correctly. He put up a cool video, showing their new agreements. I thought it was super interesting. And that the seller checks, yes, I'm gonna pay, no, I'm not gonna pay, or C, I'm open to paying something. How does that affect the conversation? And how important is that to this? I think you're going to say critical. So if it's obvious, just feel free to say that was a dumb question. It's obvious, Audrey. What do you think?
No, I mean, I don't literally, I mean, this is real estate. There literally are no dumb questions anymore. I mean, our world literally
I don't
got
know.
on its head. I mean, legit, right? Because
Fair enough.
you got like, 19-year-olds and you got 82-year-olds. So well, I mean,
Wait a
seriously.
minute, it's Florida. What?
Well,
and in truth, you have the 19-year-olds and the 82-year-olds.
well, yeah, because and they're all, and every age in between is selling. So no, that's
Yeah,
not a dumb
yeah.
question.
Point
And
taken.
I can only speak from my brokerage, but we are in the process of creating our own listing agreement. Just because of, when you think about it, and we're really trying hard to, comply with the spirit of the settlement, because, I mean, the settlement isn't black and white. Number one, it's not official yet, right? So things can still be changed. So it's hard. We're living in this mucky gray world of, we don't know we think we know which way things are going to go, but we're not exactly sure yet. So that makes it tough. So
It's not official yet?
no.
I thought that
November,
was the whole point of August 18th.
November.
That was the deadline NAR put in place for everything, but it's still not finalized until
Oh,
November.
oh, all
November.
right. So, God,
Yeah.
wow. Okay.
So
Fair.
that even makes it a little more more challenging for us. So, in Florida, we have, the state association provides documents. We have our local association that provides listing documents. So, and they're all so different, so we really try to address, we're sitting down with a seller, we try to address the listing side of the compensation first. And then we move on to the other side. Do you not? Do you want to deal with it when an offer comes in? We leave the decisions in the hands of the seller at that point. So because, and most of our sellers, have been with us a while. And that, again, remember, we are Southwest Florida. So we have a very experienced, bunch of sellers with us. They want to continue to do things kind of the way that they always have done.
That's true. Well, that's actually not a small factor. It's a fair point. I mean, it's one thing that people don't talk a lot about, that's in my head often, is the difference between a 30-year-old buyer or seller and a 60, 70-year-old buyer or seller.
Right.
How I transact, to your point, is very different than how my kids are going to transact,
Right.
and the way they're going to look at it, and the fact that they are probably, like, two of my friends' kids did not use a buyer broker. I'm like, you're crazy. Like, it's almost like the reverse FISBO. And they both did it. They went around and said, I don't need to, and up their prices and figured out a way to go around to deal with it. So, and then you get into the whole thing with New York and like Massachusetts, where the attorney does most of it, does a lot of it anyway. That really complicates it in addition.
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting. Sorry to interrupt, Corey, but that's kind of was in my head when you were thinking about that. That's such a valid point.
Well, thank
You
you.
know?
I mean, I'm feeling good. I've made a couple.
I know you're
love,
doing good,
Audrey.
Corey. Actually, I have something real quick. Well, I love all of you, but I have something for Prem and for Sarah. I want to call out the comment that came in from Claw/Vesta Plus. Thank you, Kelly, for sending that in. That there is software that they've created called Checkmate Compliance. This is, I guess, a little free plug for them. That will manage that violation detection, including AI violations. So so it's good to know that, sorry, free plug for Kelly, but it is, if it's out there, you should take a look at it. Worth noting. And so let's talk a little bit about how the industry is pivoting for the last 15 minutes about what new stuff is coming on out there. We have Zillow with a touring agreement, which I am absolutely fascinated by. I'm not going to lie. I think it's so interesting. We have some stuff you and I are talking about, a company called Final Offer. Some of this stuff that the group said is, I'm going to turn it to Prem, is not new, but seems to have new life. So I'll let you kind of take it from there, Prem, on your thoughts on some of what's the new stuff that's coming around.
Look, I think a lot of the tech vendors that I've interfaced with in trying to help, equip their customers, the realtors, with technology to kind of navigate these changes, it's been pretty remarkable, the level of innovation, even over the past 90, 120 days.
Change breeds change, right? Innovation, and it's true.
Yeah. So necessities, the mother of
yes, that one, that was it.
Yeah. And there have been other, some platforms out there for a while. You mentioned Final Offer. They do an amazing job creating transparency in the system.
Just because I think his buy now button, he knows his buy now button is very cool. Like, to me, like the idea that like if you go into, it's like eBay or Etsy, and I guess I'm throwing a free plug to Final Offer, and I don't really purposely mean to. They don't spend any money with us, but I do think that his buy now button is really fascinating to me, and I think it's interesting. Will consumers do that if they can circumvent all of this?
Well, I guess that's TBD, right? We'll see.
Right, I think it is TBD.
We were just talking about how hard or how challenging change is for our real estate practitioners, right? And so, I mean, let's face it. Let's go up 50,000 feet. Does a buyer's agent bring value to a transaction? That's unequivocally, absolutely they do, right? Does a listing agent bring value to a transaction? Unequivocally, absolutely they do.
Absolutely.
And so back to your question about innovation and technology. Look, I've been in this industry for a while, worked with a lot of tech companies, both my own and others out there. A majority of the vendors want their customers to be happy and want with the technology or the solutions that they're providing. And while there was, some heartburn over, we got to implement this because August 17 is next week and we got to do it yesterday and you need to do it like that, they're having to deal with that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think the real estate community needs to lean on their technology partners, because whether it's the product that, you just gave a plug for, or it's their existing vendor that's got AI solutions, right? Like helping eliminate Corey's time of sifting through this stuff, 2 minutes or 5 minutes or whatever it is. Lean on your tech partners, man, because they're there to help you out.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that. Of course, you and I are biased, but the truth of it is in our esteemed few years of experience, Prem, we would happily over the bar say that of all the 50 million solutions that are come in during change or money, the two times seem to come in for new tech into the industry. Either there's a lot of money coming into the industry or there's legislative change. About 10 of those are going to stick, man. And that's not necessarily a small number, and they're not going to stick in a small way. They're going to change the way we do business, the new tech. They are. And so I feel like for Prem and I, especially if we're running around the conferences, you're always asking yourself, I'm sure same for you, Corey and Sarah, which tech's going to stick? So on that note, Corey, you said you're willing to talk about Zillow and the Turing agreement. That is in a way new tech. It's a new thing. I'm fascinated by it. What is your take on it and how it will change? Because I mean, if you're a consumer and you can sign a touring agreement, you don't have to sign the buyer broker agreement. What ramifications are there? And God knows Zillow is a industry disruptor. So we can't put any lack of stock by their ability to change the industry.
Yeah, one of the questions that as a brokerage owner, you need to ask yourself is, does that, if I start with a touring agreement, okay, right? Because even if I don't personally like it, it's out there and people are hearing about it and seeing it.
100%.
So I need to know about
Yep.
it. So I need to know about it, right?
Smart.
And
Agreed.
so, and secondarily with that, does it fit what potentially could be a buyer broker agreement? Does it have the 4 pieces that are tied into the settlement? So there's a lot of things that we kind of need to think through, because initially, okay, great, look at this document, sign it, you don't owe me anything, and it's only good for today. Okay, well, as an agent, great, I'm working for free again, right? So I'm back where I was before. So I have to
interesting point.
So I have to kind of think about that. If I'm, an amazing buyer's agent and I know my worth and I know the amazing job I'm going to do for those buyers, I might say, you know what, this is my agreement. This is what I charge. If you want to sign it, great. If you don't, feel free to go next door, because maybe you're not someone I want to work with. I think buyer's agents have had this like self-conscious thing their whole life. They become a buyer's agent because they don't want to talk about the money up front like a listing agent does, because they haven't had to explain their value, right? So at least typically when I was first in the business back in 2005, when everything was easy, I jumped right in and I wanted to be a buyer's agent because I didn't understand the listing side yet. Right. So most agents jump in first as a buyer's agent because,
well, it's easier to get into the buyer side first.
Exactly.
A lot of them start on a team, they're an assist, they train on the buyer side for sure.
Right. But now it's sort of equal footing. So now as an agent, you need to know how to work the list side and the work the buy side and talk about your value. So, I mean, I think each brokerage needs to make a decision on their own whether or not they want to use that touring agreement. We don't typically use it. We created our own buyer brokerage agreement that we pushed out in July because we wanted to be ahead of the curve. Just because, that's just the way that we like to do things. But I'm not saying it's bad or not. It's just every broker needs to decide if that's going to work for them and does it work for your MLS.
So a broker could, so that's actually an interesting thing I hadn't thought of. So a broker could create their own version of a touring agreement, and that would not, Sarah, break the rules, anything like that. How would an MLS perceive that? If Corey creates a touring
buyer agreement is what's in place, as long as it has those 4 tenants within it.
Yep.
Can we refresh the 4 tenants real quick? You don't mind? What are the 4 tenants? Does anybody know off the top of their head?
I don't know off the top of my head. I would actually have to look it up because
okay,
I'm
Corey
on the other
might.
side of the house.
Yeah, that's reasonable.
Isn't it terms? So there's something about terms. I can't remember the others, but because again, I created that's been a long time in the last 60 days, but it's like, Sarah, I know you're hopefully looking it up while I talk through this. It's like terms and then 3 other things.
It's okay. We don't need to put it in the spot.
Yeah,
but the bottom line is there are the major tenants. And so as long as the tenants are there, then do you think we'll see, and maybe Prem, you can answer this, like, do you think we'll start to see brokers in competition in effect with Zillow, since they've kind of broken the seal, which is really what Corey is saying? Like, will they more like do that? Will they go that route? I hadn't really even considered it, honestly.
I mean, aren't brokers already in a competition with Zillow, right? Like, what I do see, particularly for those brokers that want to post or publish compensation related to compensation or commissions on their listings. I'm already hearing about brokers that are designing or developing entire online marketing strategies and plans to drive traffic activity at the local level back to their site.
100%. And you know what else they're doing?
And so, getting like, what's the key differentiator of these portals, right? It's the eyeballs. It's all about the eyeballs.
Yeah,
And
that's very
the
true.
brokers become more proficient at driving localized eyeballs in their respective markets. You know, I think the rest of their value proposition, the rest of Corey's company's value proposition in its marketplace speaks for itself, right? So
Well,
I see that happening.
I'm with you. You know, look, it's funny to me a little bit. This is a little bit of personal opinions. By the way, thank you, Alex. And by the way, Alex used to work for me. You, he said service negotiation, ex, exception, expectations, exclusivity, certainly for Massachusetts. He called it. So there you go. Thank you, Alex. I do think like you know that the MLSs are always going to be valuable because it's going to go back to what they started as, which is even though they provide more now, which is this accuracy of data. And I said that to somebody in a call a couple hours ago. I'm like, it doesn't matter. Oh, okay, so maybe, and we'll dovetail in a minute to clear corporation. Oh, it's the death of the MLS. It's just not going to happen. Having run syndication for 9 years for List Hub, I can tell you for a fact, because it's not like Zillow never took listings manually. It is so hard to keep the data accurate, meaningful, up to date. And now even more so because like if you change a number of the price or the square footage, or it says half bath instead of full bath, because I did a renovation, if that change isn't in on these major portals within 5 minutes, you know, the seller is like to the agent, and the agent is not going to call some major portal's customer care and get them to change it. It is not going to happen. They're going to call the MLS, who, by the way, would always call us. So that's how that works, right, Sarah? I mean,
Absolutely.
so I mean, the MLSs aren't going anywhere. They serve their purpose. They've always served their purpose. If anything, as we become more aware and attuned to data, the MLS will really, I believe, only become more important, candidly. I do also believe, Corey, that Prem is right, that if you're in a major, I'm going to buy in Florida, right? And I'm not Corey, I'm sorry. But if I'm going to buy in Florida, my mother might, though, is she's like, that's fine. She has a lot of money. You're good. So if I'm going to buy in Florida, then I'm going to like, and I need to know if I'm going to have to pay the fee. And then I look at a listing and let's say this is how it's going to go. I'm going to look at and see it on Zillow or RDC or whatever, Realtor or Homes, whatever the case may be. I'm going to go to the local site of that broker, right? And say, because now here's a question. Can you say on the listing that it's on Zillow, check our site for compensation? Can they do that? Can they say that, Sarah? No?
No.
Okay.
The words compensation are not going to be
I know,
within our
sorry, it's
MLS
the
office.
C word.
Period.
I said the C word.
They can't even save a listing. We have field rules set up. They can't even save a listing with compensation in the verbiage anywhere within the listing sheet.
Well, there you go. So that answers your question, Dave Howe, who said, sorry, I probably shouldn't say your name. Thank you, Dave. But should you feel you should be allowed to communicate? He asked Corey if you should feel they should be allowed to communicate concession buyer credits in the public marketing remarks, or should it only be allowed in confidential agent remarks? If I'm clear, I believe it can also not be in confidential agent remarks. Is that correct?
You're asking me?
No, or for Prime. Well, I'll ask Sarah for Prime specifically.
For us, compensation is no longer allowed in the MLS.
Period. Right.
Period.
Okay. Okay. I know. How hard can we
Broken
say
record.
It? Yeah. No, it's okay. It's good. What about you, Corey? Like the question was really directed towards you.
Yeah. So we can't use the previous two C words, but in our local MLS, in our confidential agent remarks, we are allowed to say seller concessions available. That is what you are allowed to say.
Look at Corey's face.
You cannot say
look at Sarah's face.
anything outside this box. I'm just telling you. But again, so many people intermingle what the C means. So I think it just, and that'll flesh itself out eventually, because it's again,
right. Yeah. Well, in different markets, again, this is the whole point of this conversation. Different markets are trying to accommodate differently. It's not wrong either way, right? Everybody's trying to deal in the new reality. And I think Alex asked a follow-up question. Can you add a link saying check here for more information in the listing sheet and have it there? And the answer is clearly going to be no. Sorry, Alex. I can already answer it.
We don't allow links within the public remarks.
So we allow them in the confidential comments. So you can, again, every MLS is different and they choose different rules. So
Yeah.
in the confidential comments, you are allowed to put a link to the brokerage website. It can't take you directly to that listing details page, but it can take you to a page where all listings, and then you got to find the other.
Well, and it couldn't take you to the broker listing detail page because that's MLS data technically.
No,
right?
because we've added in, if the seller has chosen to add, we've added in that there, right? So
I see. Okay.
it's right. Yeah.
Okay. Prem, do you want to say anything on any of it?
Well, you asked about listing syndication a moment ago, and my creative gears were spinning. Like,
Yeah.
wouldn't it be cool to have on the property detail page, click here for more information about the property, but more information about the property. Sarah, I saw you nodding your head.
I know. I
Click here for
shook
more
my
information
head.
about the property. But you know what? The portals won't let that happen. They don't want people leaving their site. They just
Right.
won't do it.
Not
That's
like that.
that's
It
true.
could be
Yeah.
branded, and then if it's
Yeah.
branded and it goes to someone else's website,
Yeah.
then yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, your agents
Yeah,
would be
that's
up in
true.
arms.
Well,
So
I will, by the
Moral
way,
of the story is companies like Corey's all over this country need to focus on driving what they call the mid and long tail traffic environment, which is regional and localized traffic to your sites. Now is the opportunity to do it. Do it.
yeah. Oh, I like that. I'll take that summary. Let me do like any good news article. Give sorry, Dave, my apologies. I did not read the question right. He said concession buyer credits, not compensation. So my apologies, Dave. Now, this does tee us up perfectly. I'm gonna call it. We have, because Prem gave me a lovely, beautiful exit. I will talk about, if you think this was a hot one, join us next time when we discuss, God help me, I know, pocket listings is the October one, as joined by James DeWiggins, who you all probably know, Mike Hickman of Seven Gables also probably know, and Liz Sturrock of Miami also probably know. I'm looking forward to that one. It's gonna be a good one because, as everybody believes, the next thing up on the potential chopping block, we'll say it like that, right, Sarah, is clear cooperation, which is pocket listings in effect. So that everybody thinks that's the next thing to potentially go. So but it's prevalent in the industry. People do it. It's widely used. So it's really a question of then what happens if that happens. So join us next time. And I know. And let us know, again, I'm sorry, but I will never get behind BWI, Brianna. Anyway, thank you. Thanks everybody for joining us. Thank you, panelists. Thank you. This was super interesting. I
Audrey.
learned a lot,
Thank you,
and that
Audrey.
is the goal. All right, have a good day. See you
See y'all.
later. Bye-bye. Thank you.